By the time I realized the small black dome mounted under Karen's roof was pointed directly at my bedroom window, it was already too late to pretend it was accidental. The lens didn't just face my yard, it tracked movement, tilting slightly. Whenever I stepped outside, like it was curious, like it was alive, I tested it twice, just to be sure, walking to my mailbox and then pacing slowly across my driveway, and both times the camera adjusted with me. That's when the uneasy feeling hit my stomach. This wasn't neighborhood security. This was personal. If you've ever had that one HOA neighbor who treats bylaws like a weapon and silence like compliance, then you already know this story doesn't end quietly. What I'm about to tell you completely changed the way our entire street operates, and trust me, Karen never saw it coming. So before this gets any crazier, make sure you're subscribed to Sham Stories, because situations like this only escalate. Karen had always acted like she owned the block, even though she was just another homeowner with too much time and a laminated copy of the regulations. She once reported my lawn because it was a quarter-inch over the approved height, and another time she emailed me about the tone of my porch light. We'd recently disagreed at an HOA meeting when I questioned a proposed fee increase, and she didn't appreciate that several neighbors sided with me. Looking back, the camera went up just 3 days after that meeting. Coincidence? Not a chance? The next morning, I rolled my trash bin out earlier than usual and left it near the curb as a test. Within 5 minutes, I received an HOA warning email about improper bin placement timing. 5 minutes. Act confirmed ITHI was watching live, monitoring, waiting for something she could turn into a violation notice. Suddenly, my home didn't feel like mine anymore. Every delivery driver, every guest who walked up my path, every time I stepped outside in my own yard felt observed through that tiny black lens. Instead of marching across the street and confronting her, I chose something better. I chose patience. I started taking photos of the camera angle from different spots on my property. I recorded small clips showing how it shifted when I moved. I saved every single HOA email with timestamps. If Karen wanted to watch my house, fine. I was about to make sure every move she made was documented right back. And what I decided to do next would turn that little camera into the biggest mistake of her HOA career. The response didn't come from Karen this time. It came from one of the quieter board members, asking for a special meeting to review concerns regarding surveillance and enforcement procedures. That single sentence told me my email had landed exactly where it needed to. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening, and word traveled faster than I expected. By the time I walked into the small clubhouse, more neighbors were seated than I had ever seen at an HOA gathering. Karen sat stiffly at the front table, papers stacked neatly in front of her, her expression tight but controlled. I took a seat. Near the middle, my folder resting calmly on my lap. When the floor opened for discussion, I didn't rush. I waited until the board member who had responded to me invited me to speak directly. I stood, introduced myself plainly, and began outlining the timeline. I walked through the camera installation date, the sudden spike in violation notices, and the precise timestamps linking my outdoor activity to HOA emails. I passed printed copies down each row so neighbors could see the pattern themselves. Then, I showed still images demonstrating how the camera's angle extended past incidental street coverage and directly toward my windows. I kept my voice steady the entire time. No accusations, just facts. When I finished, there was a noticeable shift in the room. Several neighbors nodded quietly as they compared the documents in their hands. One even spoke up, mentioning similar experiences with sudden, perfectly timed notices. Karen attempted to interrupt, claiming the camera was for community safety. But a board member asked her directly whether she had been personally monitoring live footage. She hesitated for half a second too long. That hesitation was louder than any confession. The discussion turned from my individual complaint into a broader conversation about privacy expectations and responsible enforcement. A proposal was raised to require that any security camera must not be intentionally directed toward another homeowner's private areas. Another board member suggested separating violation reporting from individual discretion by requiring documented verifiable inspections rather than live monitoring. For the first time since the camera appeared, I saw something new on Karen's face. Not anger, but uncertainty. Control was slipping, and she knew it. By the end of the meeting, the board voted to conduct a formal review of camera placement on the street, including hers. They also temporarily suspended automated violation emails pending investigation into enforcement procedures. As neighbors filed out, several stopped to quietly thank me for bringing it up. I didn't celebrate. I didn't need to. The shift had already happened. What started as a single lens pointed at my house had exposed something much larger. And now the outcome rested not on intimidation, but on transparency. Karen walked out without looking at anyone, and for the first time, the street felt a little less watched. Instead of reacting emotionally, I became methodical. Every morning for the next week, I stepped outside at random times and noted exactly how long it took for an HOA email to hit my inbox after. I did something even slightly outside Karen's personal standards. If I left my recycling bin visible for 3 minutes, I got a reminder. If a package sat on my porch for 10 minutes, I got a community appearance notice. Each message arrived almost instantly, sometimes within 4 or 5 minutes of the action itself. Timing was too precise to be coincidence. And I carefully logged every single instance in a spreadsheet with dates, times, and screenshots. I even filmed myself walking into my driveway while capturing the camera lens subtly adjusting to follow me. The evidence stacked up quickly, and the more I gathered, the calmer I felt. Karen believed intimidation worked best when the other person reacted. I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. Instead, I decided to test her openly. One afternoon, I stood in my driveway holding my phone at chest level as if texting, but I was actually recording. I waved slowly at the camera, then held up a handwritten sign that read, "Documenting this too." The lens shifted almost immediately. 10 minutes later, another HOA email appeared about loitering in the driveway, creating an unkempt appearance. That one made me laugh out loud. Loitering on my own property. That email became my favorite piece of evidence. I responded politely, asking how standing on my driveway violated any written guideline and requesting clarification in writing. She didn't respond directly, but the HOA account sent a vague reply about maintaining standards. That told me 2 things. First, she was using her board access to monitor residents. And second, she wasn't expecting anyone to push back formally. So I went a step further. I contacted the city's non-emergency line and asked about residential camera privacy laws. They confirmed that while security cameras are legal, intentionally aiming them into a neighbor's windows or private areas can cross legal boundaries depending on positioning and use. I requested documentation via email and saved that too. Then, without telling anyone, I installed my own clearly visible security camera above my garage. Unlike hers, mine pointed strictly at my driveway and street, carefully avoiding her windows. I wanted transparency, not retaliation. When Karen noticed it the next morning, she stood across the street staring at my house longer than usual. Later that afternoon, she sent an HOA-wide reminder about respecting neighbor privacy. The irony was almost unbelievable. That's when I knew she felt the shift. She realized I wasn't ignoring her anymore. I wasn't intimidated, was collecting proof, building a case quietly, and preparing for something much bigger than a simple complaint. And Karen still had no idea how far I was willing to take it. By the end of that week, I had a detailed log that showed a clear pattern. A warning email corresponded almost perfectly with moments. I stepped outside or did something visible from the street. I printed everything out, organized it by date, and highlighted the timestamps in bright yellow. Then I compared those times with short video clips I had recorded from my phone showing the camera adjusting toward me. The alignment was almost exact. That was the moment I stopped. Seeing this as a petty neighbor issue and started seeing it as a misuse of authority. Karen wasn't just being nosy. She was using HOA access to monitor and penalize selectively. I decided it was time to widen the circle. Instead of confronting her directly, I casually spoke to a few neighbors during evening walks. I didn't accuse anyone. I simply asked if they had noticed an increase in violation emails recently. To my surprise, 3 different households said yes. One neighbor mentioned receiving a warning about leaving their garage open for too long, even though it had been open for less than 10 minutes. Another said they were cited for having guests park on the street briefly. When I asked roughly what time those emails were sent, the answers matched periods when Karen was usually home. I didn't push further, I just listened. Pattern wasn't just affecting me, it was spreading. It gave me confidence. I wasn't alone. The following weekend, I performed another test, but this time I made it more obvious. I placed a large, bright patio umbrella directly in my yard, carefully positioning it so it blocked the direct line of sight between Karen's camera and my front window. Within 15 minutes, my phone buzzed again. The HOA email claimed the umbrella was an unauthorized temporary structure visible from the street. That was when I knew she was actively watching and reacting in real time. I responded formally, requesting the specific section of the bylaws that prohibited a temporary patio umbrella on private property. Hours passed with no reply. That silence told me more than any response could have. She wasn't prepared for direct, documented pushback. She was used to neighbors quietly complying or feeling too intimidated to question her. I spent the rest of the evening drafting a formal complaint addressed to the entire HOA board, not just the shared email account Karen often used. I attached the camera photos, the timestamp comparisons, and copies of city guidance regarding privacy expectations. I kept the tone calm and factual. No emotion, no insults, just evidence. Before hitting send, I reread everything twice. I wasn't just reporting a camera. I was exposing a pattern. And once that email went out to the full board, there would be no quiet way for Karen to spin the story. I clicked send and leaned back in my chair. Knowing the real confrontation wasn't coming from across the street this time, it was coming in writing, where facts are harder to twist. 3 days after that meeting, the camera was gone. No announcement, no explanation, just an empty patch under Karen's roof where the black dome used to sit. I noticed it early in the morning when I stepped outside with my coffee and instinctively glanced across the street. For the first time in weeks, there was nothing staring back at me. The silence felt different, lighter somehow. But what mattered more than the camera disappearing was what followed. A week later, the HOA board released updated community guidelines, clearly stating that security devices must not be positioned to monitor neighboring homes, windows, or private yards. Violation reporting procedures were revised too, more instant email warnings based on subjective observation. Inspections now required documented walkthroughs conducted by at least 2 board members. Transparency replaced secrecy. And just like that, the quiet grip Karen once had on the neighborhood loosened completely. She stopped sending mass reminders. She stopped patrolling in the evenings. At the next HOA meeting, she didn't show up at all. Neighbors who once hurried inside when she walked by now stood casually in their driveways again. Kids played basketball, without parents glancing nervously toward a camera lens. It wasn't just about surveillance anymore, it was about reclaiming normalcy, about reminding everyone that authority only works when people believe it's legitimate. A few days later, I found a short handwritten note in my mailbox that simply read, "This isn't over." No name signed, but it didn't need one. I stared at it for a moment, then calmly walked back inside and placed it in my folder with the rest of the documentation. Not because I was afraid, but because I had learned the value of records. The difference now was that I wasn't reacting. Emotionally, I was prepared. And honestly, I doubted she would try anything drastic again. The spotlight had already burned too bright. People like Karen thrive in quiet corners, not open discussions. Weeks passed and life on the street settled into something peaceful again. My packages sat on the porch without triggering notifications. My trash bins rolled out without 5-minute warnings. The lens that once followed my every move was gone, replaced by something far more powerful: community awareness. If there's one thing this taught me, it's that silence empowers overreach. The moment you calmly question it, document it, and bring it into the open, the dynamic shifts. If you ever find yourself dealing with someone who mistakes surveillance for superiority, remember this story. Stand steady. Stay factual. Let transparency do the work. And if you want to hear what happened months later when Karen attempted one final move that surprised everyone, make sure you're subscribed to Sham Stories, because sometimes the real ending comes after you think the drama is finished.